Check, check, check. Okay. So now I've got mic aux and audio input capture going. Let me know. Should start working about now-ish. Yeah, okay. I'm not muted. I'm not muted in OBS. So is it working? You guys let me know. Because if it's not, I'm gonna have to check. Okay, yeah. Okay. Yeah, here you go. Here's what's going on. In OBS, I had so if audio input capture is down, it works fine for creating videos, but apparently for streaming it's kind of a non-starter. So thank you guys. Thanks for cluing me in. So that's that. Okay. All right, it's 7:29, so we're fast approaching the exciting moment when I actually start talking about what the heck I'm doing tonight. Still not 7:30 yet. So yeah, Streamlabs OBS. Okay, and just so you know, it looks to me like OBS is puking out about every 5 minutes. Okay, so the stream cuts out every 5 minutes, but then it's only out for like 10 seconds. So it seems to be pretty typical OBS. So Streamlabs OBS I have not fiddled with, but maybe I should. Maybe I should take a look. Oh, it's 7:30. Okay, so one drink of my tasty beverage. Okay, so here's what we're doing. It is 7:30 and we are live. Okay, so here's the timeline, okay? I've talked in recent videos about the workflow and how I'm trying to develop my procedures in such a way, not just in terms of how I'm doing animation, but also in terms of how I think about how I'm going to approach a shot. And what's really kind of interesting about it to me is actually the fact that I'm looking at the script. Okay, so now I've written and directed 8 feature films. Okay, 3 of which are pretty good, and 1 of which was quite successful. Well, in all those movies were edited in this software right here, Sony Vegas. Okay, and what you find is there's kind of an idea out there in Hollywood about scripts, which is that 1 page of script translates into 1 minute of screen time. Well, lo and behold, I always found that actually was the case. And I really didn't think it would be with this cartoon. I really didn't. But oddly enough, it's turning out to be almost exactly that. And there's a bit of an interactive process going on. And by the way, I'm going to be checking the comments here. Okay, so it's more about the streaming stuff. So there's an interactive process going on where what I'm doing is I'm looking at the script and I'm looking at the storyboard and I'm looking at the edit, and I'm kind of balancing all of the 3 so that as I'm going along and finding ways to economize the production a bit, I'm also making modifications to the script and just kind of keeping things matched up, right? Yeah, okay, so you're saying, I said this before, but I see this fully storyboarded approach has gotten a lot farther, faster that way. This would be my take on that at this point, okay? Which is that, because my ideas about this are always evolving, and what I would say is it winds up being a very good guide, but the more I've actually started editing and turning this into a show, I've also noticed that there's more changes being, you know, sort of folded back into the storyboard. So the storyboard is much less of a rigid template for the show than I actually thought it would be. It's still it's mostly a useful guide because I kind of remember what I had in mind with my first idea. A lot of times your first idea winds up being your best one. And also because of the way I'm doing it with Krita, typically, not always, but what happens is that the storyboard images actually wind up getting loaded into Krita and become the basis for the final shot. So everything, you know, so there's no effort wasted really. But anyway, so let's just dive into what's been accomplished this week. And I want to show this, not to like not to really like sound like I'm bragging or anything, but the reality is if you look at what most people don't think that you can do it at this kind of a pace. Okay, the idea of 30 seconds a day is pretty aggressive, but you know, to me, if I look at shows on like PBS Kids like Wild Kratts, or there's some other ones, but if you look at what's being done for broadcast, you know, I'm trying to adhere somewhat closely to the kind of aesthetic you see. So it's not so much an anime approach, although it sort of is a hybrid between what you might see on your PBS Kids type show and a you know, a kind of a conventional anime approach. So this week, I'll just kind of run this. There's no sound. I mean, there is, but I've got it turned off. So every block of 30 seconds that you see was basically done in a day. Okay, so you can see why I'm using Blender a lot, because it's really an economy thing. I'm trying to use camera moves, and you see this a lot in anime, use camera moves to help add production value without a lot of extra time. Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, 24 frames is a lot harder than 8 in terms of tweening. You know, and the tweening winds up taking a lot of time if the tween requires an extra drawing. Now, if you're doing it in Blender, like that right there, what you just saw right there was all done in Blender with shape keys. So it literally took 1 minute to do, really. I mean, maybe more than a minute, but not much more. That's all Blender shape keys. That's obviously frame-by-frame animation. That glow, I think, was actually just a transition here in Vegas. This was all done with Blender shape keys for the most part. Okay, and now what we're getting into is what I did yesterday and today. So this started yesterday. So this next 30 seconds would be what I did yesterday. Asher comes into the throne room. It's Asher, the holy man. Show respect. These guys are showing respect. Asher comes in. The king bows, but Golek doesn't. So that tells you a little bit about these two characters. So he's got some prophetic utterance he needs to give. He's like, by all means, Asher. Oh, I mean, do speak. But make it quick. The king has pressing matters to attend to. Something of that nature. Okay. So this is all shape keys. This was actually done. That's pretty good. And, you know, it was done very quickly in Blender. This was done quickly too, but I'll get back to why here in a bit. That's all Blender shape keys. That's a static image with just a camera push. This is another shot run in reverse. That shot and this shot have nothing but lip sync. So again, it's a static image. Are you sure? He says. And then that's it for today. So you got a full minute of animation here that was all done in the last 2 days. A montage of, oops, OBS Studio. Okay, so I'm waiting for OBS to reconnect. Let me see here. Yeah, so OBS is reconnected. Sorry about that. Like I said, every 5 minutes it seems to puke out for 10 seconds. So we'll start back here. So what we have in this last minute before we get to the major break, where we've ended the introduction, in essence, the first 4 minutes of the show. So what's going to be happening here is actually each of these shots is going to be pushing in. These two guys are both a little off character. They were drawn quite some. Seen that in movies where, like at the beginning of the movie, they kind of in many movies you'll well, I shouldn't say many, but some CGI like cartoons, you'll see a situation where the introductory segment of the show is actually a sequence of paintings where it dissolves from fairly finished paintings that don't match the same aesthetic style of the cartoon. Okay, that's what's going to happen here. So you're going to see these battle scenes that are just going to be still images. Obviously, we want to have some cool music behind it. Definitely looking forward to scoring the show. It's going to actually be a lot of fun. Let me see if do I have show audio here? Let me just see. Desktop audio. Yeah, see, now we've got audio output capture. That probably turns
Much has been lost to the mists of time.
But that little musical figure there.
One tale that
this is actually like
of the days following the Great Flood.
That's like 10 minutes of just dicking around in Reaper with just doing a little orchestral score. Okay, what's the goal date for the? Oh, okay, so here we go. Have another I'm working on. How far along is this one? Okay, so here's the story on the timeline. Okay, now that the workflow is kind of figured out and I've sort of settled on the style and all that, being that I am completing about 30 seconds of finished show a day, you can just do the math. And what I've done, actually, I will tell you guys, what I've done is I've calculated the viability of the show from several different directions. Okay, so one direction would be ask yourself, what do you want to make per hour, for your time? Another angle would be, what's the value of 1 minute of finished animation? I contend that in this day and age, it's kind of similar to, and by the way, this doesn't match anything you're going to see about anime production, television production, or film. This is real world people doing real world animation for real world stuff, most of which is not for broadcast. I mean, it might be a commercial, but it's going to be like explainer videos and that kind of thing. So basically, the market value of animation is basically $500 to $1,000 per finished minute. I mean, that's just kind of, and that's the way it's been for decades. I mean, corporate video. So you can sort of calculate this product from that angle. Can it earn that kind of revenue based on the length of the show, with finished animation? So that's one angle. Another angle would be based on comparing my workflow requirements and time requirements to the projected earning potential that I was given by my distributor. So I've calculated it every different way, and it all comes out about the same. It always comes out about the same. So for me, this is the deal. Based on the current workflow, one should be able to generate 24 minutes of a finished show episode in 48 days, because you're doing 30 seconds a day, therefore 48 days, which means if you figure a week to and that's working on average basically 6 hours a day, but 4 to 6 hours a day. So it's 4 to 6 hours is what it is. So what does that really come out to? That comes out to about 5 seconds per hour, I suppose, of finished animation kind of thing. And so for me, that works. Okay, so that means if I can generate, that's your deal. So then what does that come out to? That means you're talking about doing 12 episodes in 2 years, and so now we're talking about creating an episode every 2 months for 2 years, and then you wind up with a dozen episodes, and hopefully you can actually run the numbers. I'll go back to create here. If you actually, I'll do this on another layer here. If you actually ran the numbers on that, you would say if the projections based on corporate video rates are correct, then a 24-minute episode, and I'm telling you guys this because, if this is something you want to do, this is kind of the realities I think you're probably looking at. So you got 24 minutes. If you're out there and you're kind of just into animation, or you want to create a short, or maybe you want to do the Patreon thing. Maybe you want to do like Darren T just released a course. You know, some people want to create courses. I've made a very conscientious decision. I don't want to do that. I'm not interested, at least not at this point. It could change, but I'm not interested in creating courses. I'm not interested in setting myself up as some sort of teacher about animation as far as animation technique. Because when you see that, 9 times out, you look at Howard Wimshurst's channel, what you're talking about for the most part is learning how to do something that, if you look at everything that's happening in broadcast, in other words, the real content being acquired by real networks for real broadcast to real consumers. Basically, it's all something from another time. You know, you're not really seeing a lot of traditional, what we'll call Disney style animation. And excellent. 30 minutes is great. I'm commenting here on what you just posted on the comments. So there should be about a 15-second delay on that. So I'm not interested in doing any of that. I'm interested in doing the work. And the work is not about idealized Disney style animation with amazing tweens, because if you want to see that, go see Aaron Blaze. You know, go see Howard Wimshurst. You know, you can go to those channels to learn about an idealized picture of what it is to animate that, in my view, doesn't really exist much in the real world. In the real world, actually, let me qualify that. It does exist in Japan, because, you know, the anime world is largely that way, although much of the work is being done at 8 frames a second. Not, right? So that's what I kind of had to figure out. And so I did. And the economies make sense. Okay, so again, back to the economic realities. If you have 24 minutes, and I'm correct that in the real world that 24 minutes is worth somewhere between $12,000 and $24,000. Okay, that's not ridiculous. Now, to some people that might watch this, that seems like a lot of money. And frankly, in the era of COVID-19, if you're working at home or you're out of a job, that can be a very compelling picture, for crying out loud. For some people, you could, you know, if you did it and it took you an entire year, it would still be worth doing. And that's great. If that's you, then you should do that, if that's what you want to do. I think everybody should, you know, seize the day in this era where the game has been changed for everyone. You know, now is the time to say, hey man, I got time on my hands. Rock and roll. Now that's not why I'm doing it. I've been working at home for 30 years. So I'm kind of lucky that way. And the truth is, COVID-19 hasn't affected me very much. My life hasn't changed hardly at all because of the current situation, because, you know, it wasn't a change for me. However, in any case, if these numbers are correct, then you can just do the math. I tend to do projections very pessimistically. Okay, hey Rose, how you doing, baby? Yeah, you can get in touch with me this way. Here it is. Premier Media Design. Premier Media Design. It's really long. Okay, Premier Media Design at gmail.com. So there you go. I would love to hear from you. That's great. Because you know what? Someday, if this show takes off, I'm going to have other people out there on YouTube that I can farm some of this work out to. So maybe that's you. Anyway, so if you got 12 episodes, okay, you got 12 episodes, you can create 30 seconds per day. That means you're going to take 48 days to create 24 minutes of show. So one episode is going to take 48 days, and that assumes that you're going to have about 2 weeks, a week or two, in which to write the thing and then do the post-production and then the score, you know, the musical score. I tend to be fairly fast on both of those things, writing and music, so it doesn't concern me, to be able to knock out a show in a week, insofar as post-production is concerned. So, I mean, geez, the movie I produced, wrote, directed, edited, scored, that did the best, literally was done from start to finish, like from nothing to finished movie in 4 months. So it can be done. It's pretty intense. I mean, it can definitely get pretty intense, but it can be done if you got nothing better to do, and that's what you're doing. So you got 12 episodes, 24 minutes apiece, takes 48 days, let's just say 2 months to do. Okay, so now that means you can do 6 episodes per year. So that means my dozen episodes that are planned will take 2 years. And again, if the numbers hold, if it turns out the numbers are right, then that 12 episodes is worth somewhere between 6 and 12K. I'm sorry, 12 to 24K a piece. Now those numbers are extremely low. If you go out and look into what's the cost of animation, or what's the value, or what does it cost this or that studio to create animation, the numbers are going to be in orders of magnitude higher than what I'm talking about. Okay, I'm talking about today in the real world. Okay, and I'll give you an actual example. I have a feature film that is earning royalties. Okay, so let's just go. I'll just pull this down here and show you. I'm not going to show you my financial information, but if you go, let's go Healed by Grace on IMDb. Okay, so let's just take this as a real world example. Okay, so here it is, Healed by Grace 2. So this movie, I wrote it, directed it, scored it, the whole thing. It was released actually 2 years ago. It's kind of into its 3rd year. Actually, 2020 would be its 3rd year in existence. Okay. So this movie, I mean, long story short is this. That movie earns about $300, $400, $500 a month. So there you go. So yeah, I mean, it's a big job to make a movie. If you're into it and you want to do it, go ahead and do it. And it's reasonably well placed in the marketplace. It's a chick flick horse movie. It earns $300, $400, $500 a month. So it's not great. Can't really make a living, with one movie like that out there. But that's the real world climate today for a low budget film. It just is. Okay, so okie dokie. So anyway, getting back to the cartoon. If you got these 12 episodes, 20, so now you're talking about somewhere between 250 and 300K for 2 years of work. Okay, so now I'm a pessimist. Any business analysis, I'm always going to be Mr. Pessimistic. So I'm going to assume it's going to be at best half that. And then when it actually turns out to be that, I'm going to be happy, right? So that means you're talking about the numbers work out something like this, and this is why I talk about workflow. What we're talking about is working 6 hours per day in exchange for, after 2 years, a residual revenue of roughly, we'll say 150K. So you're talking about 70, 80K per year. You're talking about $70,000 or $80,000 of residual income, because I would suspect there's a year that lasts basically forever. And not only that, but it also, I think we can probably presume that it would create other opportunities, from other corners where, people kind of see what you're doing and maybe want to collaborate on something or whatever. It creates other opportunities, one would think, right? So for me, the numbers make sense. The numbers do make sense. I can work for 6 hours a day. But again, for it to work, all of this has to hold true. You have to be able to crank out that 30 seconds per day of finished animation, right? So for me, that has informed the aesthetic and the approach to the workflow. Okay? So hope that all makes sense and, you know, hopefully is interesting to people. And there we go. So that's the financial equation of this show. And I would say, if you look at these shots, I would say, you know, pretty much it looks the way it's going to look. Like right here is a good example of a background that this is not complete. Like this background needs some pillars or something. But having said that, like in these ones need to be fixed. So there's definitely some things I'm gonna have to go back and, you know, there's a little bit of time into, you know, tweaking things out and making them a little bit better. But the workflow is sufficiently procedural that I can do that, and the cost is very, very low. Like for example, if this shot, let me see if I can pull this one up. Actually, this one was done. This is 40. Okay, so let's see if 40 is a blender or if it's a Krita, because I can't remember. Okay, so 40.blend. Okay, whoops. Okay, so here's the shot. All right, so here's a shot that looks, in my opinion, principally like something you'd see in any anime. Okay? Okay, all of the animation is shape keys. All right, so I'll cover that here right now. What's a shape key? Well, this is the actual scene. Okay? So now, what I said about it being procedural meant this. If I go into the folder for shot 40, okay, so let's do that. Let's go to shot 40. All right? And you see the assets right here. There's an animation of the two guys that actually got spat directly out of Krita, and then there's a background painting. Okay? So then here's the final render that came out of Blender. So in Blender, if we go ahead and tweak the display so that we can see what's really going on here. Okay, so this is simply a plane that has the animation of their lip sync just mapped onto it. Well, I can bring that into Krita, change the painting, reload it into Blender, and just re-render, and the whole upgrade to a little bit better quality only requires the time that it took for me to fix the painting. Everything else is done and saved. So, okay, so that's what I mean by procedural. What I do now feeds downstream into what I can do later. Okay. Okay, so quick break. Have you seen I Lost My Body and Next Gen on Netflix? They were done in Blender and both were done really well. You know what? I haven't watched anything that anyone else is doing at all because I don't care. Because once I figured out what maybe the influences were to sort of shape the workflow and the aesthetic of what I'm doing, basically all I'm interested in is getting my work done. So I'm not tuned into what's going on Netflix. I'm really not tuned in much to what's going on YouTube. Don't know. Don't care. I'm too busy doing the work of an actual show. That's my kind of little bit of a jackass answer, you know, about my philosophy. I'm not paying much attention at all. I mean, there's good stuff like, I think the Dragon Prince is pretty cool in terms of how they're using 3D for 2D. Okay, Rose, that sounds good. I think there's some good stuff there, and I love Aaron Ehash, you know, as a writer. He was a great writer on Futurama and an excellent head writer on Avatar: The Last Airbender. Really talented guy, and so I expected the Dragon Prince to be good. And it is good. It's got some quirks, but and frankly, Aaron in some respects could be accused of repeating himself a bit. But you know, we all do, and frankly, there's aspects of my story that, you know, are kind of stolen from various kinds of influences. You know, I kind of actually relate the biggest influence to be the old Incredible Hulk TV show, only in the sense that my my characters in the different episodes are essentially going from village to village, where there's a long-term arc of who's chasing them. But other than that, each episode is a standalone episode where they sort of get involved in somebody's problems and solve that problem, right? So this pilot episode is all about the problem that drives the long-term arc in the first place, combined with how do we get the main characters all get them together so that they're together and they're incentivized to throw their hats in the ring as a team and then head out for subsequent episodes. That's kind of what's going on. So back to Blender. So what I did here is I find this quite cool that there is no animation. There's no hand-drawn animation on these guys. And I like the hand-drawn animation. Okay, there's plenty of shots in my timeline here that have hand-drawn animation, like this one. You know, there's an example. There's some hand-drawn animation. But at the end of the day, you do have to economize. And so what I find myself doing is I think about every shot. I look at every shot and I go, man, what's the least I can do to get the most value for the least work, basically. Okay, and so in this case, what we have are shape keys. So what I did was I brought this animated sequence that included their mouths, you know, the lip sync, brought that into Blender, and then I went over here and I just created these two, what they call shape keys. Okay, so this is it's just a distortion of the art, and this is just another distortion of the art. Okay, now you could argue, if you look at this, you could argue that this falls apart. Okay, so it doesn't really work, and I completely would agree if you said that. Wouldn't bother me a bit, because it doesn't work. Except that it does in the context of the edit, and I knew that was going to happen. So if you look up here in this corner, what you're actually seeing is something that does work, boom, until it kind of right about there it quits working. Okay? Fine. That's reality. Now let's go to the edit and see what actually happened in the edit. Well, what I did was, watch this. Boom. So the instant it starts to fall apart, you're cut into another shot. Okay? Well, those, you know, it's kind of funny because that is such an example of you can spend so much time trying to get that animation perfect, and you spend all day on it, completely forgetting that in the actual edited show, it's highly likely that the part you spent hours and hours and hours perfecting, absolutely love, that had all that production value that you thought was so cool, might actually cause the story to slow down. You know, it might actually interrupt the flow. And so you wind up having to take this precious thing that you spent all this time on and cut it. Now, that doesn't mean you don't spend a lot of time on something. Sometimes you definitely do, okay? But you also, when you're, that's actually why this workflow is pretty cool, because whenever, as I'm going forward, this shot's a great example of what I'm talking about, where I knew I wanted, first of all, actually, let me say this. The simplest solution, this is something people say in programming all the time. The best code is the code you didn't have to write, okay? So in principle, the same thing holds true. I only use that metaphor because I do a lot of, you know, I've done a lot of programming over the years, okay? But I use that metaphor because it's really true of this as well, is the best animation is the animation you didn't have to do. So with this shot, I actually almost completed it by saying, hey, let's have this guy nod. This guy does his nod, and you know where the audience's eyes are going to be. The audience is going to be looking at this guy. Why? Because he moved, and he'll grab their attention. So I actually considered not animating this guy at all. And you know what? The truth is, the shot would have been fine. It would have looked perfectly fine if I hadn't animated that guy. But I figured I wanted to try it. You know, in Blender, I thought, you know, it's going to take me 1 minute to create this shape key. And so let's just put it in there and see how it flows. And if I don't like it, I'll just delete the shape key and re-render it. You know, no big deal. Well, it turned out it worked okay. So now you might be out there going, well, what's a shape key? How do you do a shape key? Okay, let me show you. Here's how you do a shape key. in Blender. And if you're a Blender fanboy and you love Blender 2.8, 2.9 now, I'm sorry. Okay? I'm not lying when I tell you that I do, in fact, have Blender 2.8 on my system. So far, in the real world workflow of this thing, I ain't using it much. Little bit. But basically, it's not that useful. And the reason it's not that useful is that what you can do with animation mapped to a plane with Blender 2.79 using lights, using shape keys, using bones, whatever, what you can do with this is still beyond what you can do with the Blender grease pencil in 2.8 and forward. It just is. It hasn't caught up yet. And if you're going to have to create something with the Blender grease pencil, render it out, and then map it back to a plane in order to do what you really want to do, then what have you really gained? So that's just me. I'm a bit of a Luddite. You know, I'm clinging to the stuff that's a little older because it works and it's more stable. Yeah, mesh data. And you just add a shape key. So it's really this simple. You say, okay, I want to do a shape key on this guy. All right. Hit the plus key. Now I've just created a shape key, and then just go into edit mode. Okay? Boom. All right, so now let's say we're going to have this guy bend his head kind of back and forth this way. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab kind of the area of his face, and then I'm going to say, well, I want it to sort of turn at the neck. So I'm going to click here, and then I'm going to hit my period key so that any rotation is going to be based around the cursor, not around the center of mass of the mesh. Okay, and then I hit the R key, and as you can see, I need to crank up the center of influence of the proportional editing tool. But the problem is, you know, his hat's lagging behind. So now that tells me, okay, I actually need to grab all this, right? And usually what I do is I go, you know what, if I just move my mouse and it actually looks pretty good animating in real time, then that's a pretty solid candidate for a shape key. So there it is. Okay, so I bend it back like this, and then I just jump out of edit mode. And guess what? Now, this shape key, I can crank the value up at any time. And all I do is just put my mouse over it and hit the I key. Mouse over it, hit the I key, and now that animation is baked into my my animation. So now when he says show respect, he's turning his head a little bit. Now I'm not going to put that in the show. But that's how quick it is to create, you know, what I call secondary animation. Basically, secondary animation means animation that doesn't involve creating more drawings and more drawings and more drawings. Okay? And wherever I can get away with it, that's what I want to do. And sometimes it's really amazing how you find that the simplest shots just look great. You know, and add a lot of production value to your show. So this is another example. This shot, let me look at this real quick. Okay, what I actually did on this shot is quite funny. I'm going to pull this one up in Blender as well. This is 45, so let's take a look. Open 45. Okay, where's Blender? I'm sure I did this in Blender. Something's wrong here. Ah, back here. He's back here. Let's pull up this one. Better yet, let's pull up 52. Well, again, this is another way you economize. I mean, the fact of the matter is, when it comes to dialogue, like this shot, I created him here, and then I created him here. I just changed the background. Basically the same background here. Okay, so I'm going to pull this up in Blender. This is number 52, and I'll show you what I did. But I'm going to pause and look at the comments here. Dude, you are just commenting like nobody's business. I know you're used to the commands, but it's all the same to me. I guess I've been using 3D application around the same length of time as you have. Yeah, I mean, I've been doing the 3D thing since about 1995, 96. Started out with True Space. If you remember True Space, created by Caligari. The character animation was pretty lame in True Space, but other than that, it was a pretty good app. And the guys at Caligari actually wind up being a client of mine for a few years. I was doing a certain media-related service for them in exchange for the latest updates of the software. But at the end of the day, I had about $3,800 into 3D Studio Max back in the day. So that would have been like 1998. Okay, I just roll with it, but you have to use what works for you. Yes, I do. I remember there was a time when Krita and Blender was off the table. I know, man. I still use OpenTunes almost every day, but yeah, Tahoma. I have Tahoma. Okay, so I haven't officially plugged it on my on my YouTube channel, but I will tell you guys that here it is. This is Tahoma. This is Tahoma. So, open a recent file. Let's see what we have here. Oh, there's a shot from the show. My main, Tahoma is fine. My main beef with it is Jeremy changed some things about the way the spacebar works, such that when I press down, instead of immediately going into zoom mode, it stays in pan mode. And then you see what just happened there. After a second, it switches, and when I let it up, you can zoom. And that's a pretty small nitpick, but that actually is a bit of a workflow interruption for me. I find it often happening in Tahoma that I press the spacebar and I have to actually wiggle it a little bit so that I can let up and then do the zoom, which to me is a little stupid, but I'm thinking there must be something about the way Jeremy works in OpenTunes that caused him to prefer that. It could be that it's a bug, but no, Tahoma's fine. It's just OpenTunes with a little bit of some bug fixes, and then the whole stop motion thing is actually kind of cool. So, in long story short, is this: you can connect it to your webcam, and if you point your webcam at maybe something like this, a little sculpture, and you want to do stop motion animation, it'll actually let you bring the snapshots one at a time right into Tahoma, which is really just OpenTunes. And it's cool, Tahoma's cool. I got it. It works. The perspective grids do look good. So let's look here. Okay. Raydream, yes, I had Raydream 5. And Raydream 5 was, again, character animation was atrocious unless you wanted to make robots. In other words, there's no deformation animation at all. It was just connecting things together with parenting. But no, the extrusion-based or lofting, what they called it in 3D Studio Max, they called it lofting, where you're taking a series of what would I say, shapes, I guess, or curves, and then the 3D software connects them as intelligently as it can with a polygonal mesh. And that's how Raydream worked. And it was animatable. It was definitely a cool program. I didn't like the quality of the final animation. It very much had a look of its own, Raydream did. If you were into the POV ray type ray tracing, it looked a lot like that. But if you were into more of a scanline rendering or something a little softer like global illumination, it kind of sucked, So let's see here. Blifton 1. Did you ever consider doing your sets in 3D? For this show, I don't think I would. That seems silly to me for this show, because if you see here, well, let's go back. I'm going to scan through, but if you look at this, is most of the stuff all in the first 4 minutes of the show has really been done in the last 2 weeks. So this is all pretty new stuff. So you can see that we're going for a very cartoony, stylized kind of backgrounds. So, and it's almost never the case that I'm going to dolly around the characters. The closest I come to that would be a 2.5D camera move, so that's what you see here. This is obviously... I come from a land called... Let me kill that. I don't want the audio on right now. So it's 2.5D. This was done in Blender, so you just have a 3D camera move. This was done in Blender as well. So you're seeing a lot of 2.5D. But to actually create it in 3D for this project does not make any sense. Now I do have the Futurama fan script that I did that Darren T has in hand, and ostensibly is working on, although I think he's a little distracted with creating his training videos for OpenTunes and stuff, which is all good. But for the Futurama thing, making the sets in 3D makes all the sense in the world. And in fact, the truth of the matter is I did just that. If we look here, let me just go back up here. I'll prove that I'm not always just talking out the back end. Let's see here. Let's see here. Where is it? Farnsworth Lounge. Yeah, so there it is. There's the Futurama, at least the beginnings of the Futurama Lounge. It was all textured with, well, it was all colored with textures, so that's why it looks like a monochromatic 3D. But the actual render of it is colored. So, you know, there you go. That's and it's not complete, but that's one of the views of the Futurama Lounge. So I'm just kind of leaving that project with Darren at the moment, and because I got my hands full doing this this cartoon. So let me see where we're at here. Okay, so what I was going to look at was this shot right here. I believe it was 52. So let's look at 52, and I'll show you again. I hate to always talk about economizing, but the thing, and plus, isn't it true that you're seeing if you can do what you've seen other people do, right? Which is fine and it's cool, but the problem, it doesn't have that much real world utility. So this has real world utility. This is one drawing. Okay? How is this possible? Let's look at this. This is a great study right here. Okay, this is one drawing. Not counting the background, obviously. All that animation is one drawing. But how? How could this be possible? How is this possible? Here's how it's possible. Number one, let's look. Okay. What happened to his lip sync? It's gone. And now it's back. Okay, what's going on? What's going on is I've got a single drawing mapped to a plane, and what I did was I simply went into the Blender grease pencil and I picked a color, and what I did actually was I went like this. I just drew a shape, okay, with actually one of these obnoxious fluorescent colors, and then I went in here and I just sampled, boom, the color of his skin. I just sampled it and then dragged it over to the stroke, and then I covered up his mouth, and then I did all the lip sync with the grease pencil. So the grease pencil just overlaid over top of this single image. So again, you say, well, wait, there's all this characterization. You know, look at his scowl, look at his bending, and you know, he's moving around. What's going on? Okay, again, if we jump here to the properties window, I just created all these shape keys. All right. So what I did was I subdivided the mesh, and actually in his face, as you can see right here, I went like this. I grabbed the important stuff and I hit the W key and subdivided it a couple times. So I had more mesh resolution in the facial area. Okay? And so then with shape keys, I just created these shape keys. Arm in, lean in, scowl. Look at that. Just look at that. Just pinch it together. Just pinch the vertices. Frown. Up. Look at that. I don't know what that is. That's basically just kind of a little lean thing. And then raised eyebrows. Boom, 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 boom. Little more compassionate expression, right? Okay. And then by mixing those up and combining them, I'm telling you, to go from a single drawing of this character to that complete full animation took about a half an hour. Well, you're not supposed to be able to do something that looks like this. You're not supposed to be able to do in a half an hour. Well, guess what? You can do it in a half an hour. Now this you can't. This is going to take about an hour. Okay, because there's a lot of drawings involved. Okay, but that's how you do it, you know. And you're, at least for me, I'm continually keeping in mind what this is going to edit together. Like, how's this going to chop together? Because I don't need to show this guy turning around in 3 dimensions. The most expensive thing I can do is the following. I'll show you. I'll just create a new document here and show you. This is the most expensive thing I can do. All right, let's create a keyframe. All right, so here's sorry, let's go. Here's a guy's head, right? And then let's give him eyes, just because we want to be nice and give him a little bit of character. Okay, and we'll even give the guy some hair. Okay, what's the most expensive thing I can do? I'll show you what it is. Sorry, I got to redo this because actually this is a bit of a bug actually, but with Krita, if you don't have alpha behind it, in other words, like I drew this onto a white background, it kills the it kills the onion skins for all intents and purposes. So let's just recreate that. Okay, so boom, 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 boom. Okay, doesn't have to be a great drawing at this moment, but okay. What's the most expensive thing I can do? It's this. Okay. By far. Okay, stupid illustration, but this is the most expensive thing you can do. And this is where those of you who want to talk about doing stuff in 3D have a point, okay? If you want to turn a character in 3D space, in other words, on the Z-axis, in other words, a rotation, there is no way to do it in 2D animation if you're not gonna draw it over and over and over. You just can't. So this becomes the most expensive thing you can do. So how do I mitigate that in my own workflow? Well, okay, here's what we're gonna do. This, I want this guy to actually be doing some work, swinging his wingdinger, whatever it is, scythe or okay. So let's go ahead and take a minute and deal with this and show what it's really going to look like. Okay. The first thing I'm going to do, so there's my sketch. The first thing I might do is clean it up and say, well, I really don't want to have to redraw all the outlines if I can avoid it. So let's address that right now. Okay, so I sort of have a cleanup preset. Okay, you know, that's not too bad. Okay, so that got rid of a lot of the sketchy lines, but it's really not quite good enough. Okay, so if I do it twice, this is probably a lame example because the tree, I'm going to look at your comments here, buddy. Tons of animation on Cartoon Network. Right, puppet animation, right. Good storytelling character. Well, exactly. Exactly. It's about the characters. It's about the story. That is exactly right. It's not about animation. The movement is, I hate to say it, but the movement is the least important thing. So I'm just going to clean this up a little bit just to you know, keep it fair. But the reality is I shouldn't have done the cleanup operation. I should have just went ahead and dealt with boom. Boom. Nope. Okay. That's not too bad. That's okay. That's okay. Alright. So I'm going to leave the rest of the... I guess I'll do a little cleanup here. This is actually pretty lame. It's usually fastest just to go to like erase it and redraw it, actually. So let's just do that. So I'm going to be working fairly briskly here just because ostensibly I have an audience and I don't want to bore people. Okay. Boom. Okay, that is not great. Yeah. Oh my gosh. That's actually pretty lame. So let's just go bananas here. Oops. Let's go bananas with the liquify tool and fix things. As a righty, I definitely have a proclivity to make things sort of slant in a certain way. Boy, it looks to me like Krita has a hard time doing the liquify tool when the screen is flipped. Okay, so we'll go with that, and then this is a little problematic over here. Too big. Okay, so that's probably more like it. Okay, so for me, I'm going to save this. Might as well. Okay, so let's get a skin color going on. And then what I typically would do is on another layer, I'm going to take my pencil, but I'm going to use the freehand path tool. And one thing I always have to switch is this. The curve interpolation, which smooths out your strokes, is actually more detrimental than helpful almost all the time. Very rarely helpful. So then what I'm going to do is just draw over this, like so. Ba-dum-bum-ba-dum-bum. So I was talking about economizing, so I guess what we want to look at is... and I could have used the fill tool, by the way, on this particular example. Alright. Let's try it. What the heck? Let's go. Boom! Oh, hey, that didn't work too badly. Not too badly at all. So we definitely have a little cleanup there to do. Boom, boom, boom. Let's just pick a color. What color do we want his little hoodie thing to be? Let's do a brown-ish. And then maybe... I don't know. Maybe kind of a desaturated grayish bluish. Boom. Boom. Okay. Alright, so what are we going to do? Gosh, we could group these guys. See, this is kind of a... I mean, most times I probably would actually do this drawing and then bring it into Blender, if truth be known, but you can use the liquify tool on groups. So, you know, it's quite useful to be able to fix things up a bit. Right? So, and any keyframes propagate. So it is important, though, if you're going to mess with groups, to make sure each layer in the group has a keyframe. If it doesn't have at least one keyframe, then any changes you make to the group don't propagate as keyframes. Okay, so now they're in a group, or he's in a group, I should say. So let's go ahead and finish touching up the this character. Boom, boom, and of course he has the size. So let's go ahead and give him a little texture here on his costuming. Obviously, it seems like there's kind of something majorly missing here. So boom. That's like so me to like completely forget. By the way, you know, there's another half to his headdress there, dude. Yeah, that's so me. Get to where I'm talking about one thing and forget my own head if it wasn't screwed on. Okay, so B key, that's fine. Little muscle action there, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. Okay, so now let's go in and do a sort of a final cleanup. Gonna have to do it manually because I sort of broke some of my own rules in the way I approach this because I'm moving fast here on YouTube. But at the end of the day, it doesn't actually matter much, if the truth be known. Because this character is just going to be kind of doing some work in the foreground. Okay, so what about this side business or whatever it is? Sickle. I guess you'd call it a sickle. Let me clean up his hand and then we'll deal with the sickle. Okay. Alright, I'm going to actually slant my screen. Boop-a-boop-boop. Okay. And this can be a little rough. Doesn't have to be a perfect handle. And hit the 5 key. Now let's cut this off a bit. And boom, 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 boom. Works for me. Alright, color. We'll fill that with that, and we'll kind of pick a brownish color, I suppose, for the handle, right? Okay, cool beans. All right, now what we want to do is let's deal with shadowing. You know, you gain a lot of production value with shadows. So let's go lines. Let's call this lines. Let's call this color. And let's add a layer called shadow. SHD is my standard abbreviation. That's going to be alpha locked. So now we're going to go ahead and again use the freehand shape tool, like so. And a lot of times what I'll do with the situation like this is I will deliberately keep it zoomed out. Whoops, that's not what I wanted to do. I'll keep it zoomed out so that I'm not overproducing. I don't want to create more detail than your eye is actually going to care about when you watch the thing. Okay, so now I may at times err on the side of not giving enough detail. I readily admit that. Okay, actually I suppose a little bit of a, yeah, I mean it's supposed to be like a harsh sun type situation, so let's just go ahead and shadow this out. Shadow that out. You can see where the color isn't filled in correctly. So that's something to be aware of. And then we'll just kind of dial it in like so. Okay. Yeah, we're rocking. Okay, so let's address the color problems. I think I'll just grab the pen, or a pen, and deal with it that way. So I'm looking for, whoops, boom. I'm looking for some problems. Looking for some little holes in it. Boom. I'm going to go into behind mode so I can't accidentally make a mistake, and boom, fill that in. definitely need to do the same thing here. Wow, that's definitely problematic. Okay, cool. My nose is itching a little bit. Okay. Okay, so I always wanted to ask this question. Why don't you do the entire rough animation of the entire show first episode? It's because you want to see some progress before moving on. Partly. It's partly that I've thought very seriously about doing that, doing the whole thing as a pencil test first. I think that I would have a strong proclivity to overproduce. If I did the whole thing as a pencil test, I probably would give myself an extremely large amount of work to do that didn't actually need to be done, because if you look at my storyboard, okay, I'll explain this the best I can. If you look at the storyboard, it's probably not going to be hard to see. Okay, look at this. Okay, it's pretty obvious from the camera angles, the way I sort of edit the show in my head as I'm creating the storyboard, that my ideas are informed by a production ethic that is more ambitious than what this show can actually, what can be justified. So as you can see, I don't know, maybe you disagree, but it seems to me that when I look at the storyboard, I'm going, boy, I really was kind of ambitious with the storyboard, right? And I think that by producing it as I go, it forces me to be a little more pragmatic. And for some productions, that would be a bad thing, because you really want quality to be job one, and I use that word very loosely. I don't think it's a quality thing. You can have very, very simple animation. I mean, look at Family Guy. Family Guy's not a difficult production at all. So you can have very simple animation and still have very high, what people would call quality. Okay, so when I use the word quality loosely, I'm kind of saying, it's almost like saying that the more complex the animation is, the better the quality. But in reality, I don't actually even believe that's true. About the camera angles and the different, how I want to tell the story. But then once I'm going through it and actually doing the real work, I think it actually helps to be editing as I go as well. By editing it together, I'm looking at every shot and I'm really thinking carefully about what can be eliminated. I'm thinking very carefully about what doesn't need to be here. What's going to be hard versus what's going to be easy. That's why I illustrated the idea of a 3D turnaround. If I show a hand, this is easy. This is easy, because this is just two drawings. Boom, boom. With maybe one tween. Okay? This, especially if it's slow, is not easy. It's brutally, I shouldn't say it's difficult. It's just really, really time consuming, because you simply need a lot more drawings. And the thing is, what you find is the most expensive thing, if you want to think in terms of your time, is ink and paint. It's taking the rough pencil test, which is relatively easy and fast to do, especially if you've got a good instinct for animation. Okay? What's hard, what's time consuming, what can become extremely tedious is ink and paint. And that's why if you go back to my videos here on YouTube about 3 weeks to a month ago, what I was talking about is, geez, I'm looking at the whole process, I'm going, can I eliminate ink and paint entirely? I didn't do it on this shot. Okay? if I was going to do it on this shot, this whole layer would be eliminated. Okay. What I would do is I would go from a very rough sketch to color. And I'll actually show that right now. Okay, if I was going to go from a rough sketch to color, and I wanted this to be as economical as possible, here's what I would do. All right, and I'm going to try to do this as fast as I can. All right. First of all, I'm going to correct a couple things real quick. I'm going to correct some of the messiness on this shadow. Okay, but this is what that actual process would look like. I'd go like this. I'd go boom, 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 boom. Okay, I'd add a little detail here, little detail here. Okay, and then I'd probably reinforce this a little bit, like that, boom, boom, boom. Okay, and then just zap in some of the interior, maybe a belly button, right? Okay, a little muscle action. Okay, stop. Yep, got to delineate the fingers. Fine. Okay, we're done. That's it. Now I'm going to duplicate this layer, put it down here, and I'm going to do 2 steps. Step 1, filter, blur, 3 pixels. Boom. Now, curves. Default. Boom. That's it. And I've automatically done the outlines, and I've eliminated the whole problem of doing inking and then going to do fill operations and having it leak and fill up the whole frame, and now I'm like dealing with the fact that I have to find the leaks, blah, 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 blah. This process eliminates that. If you say, well, those lines aren't quite dark enough, fine. Let's duplicate them and then bake it down, right? So we go Control E, and this would be called outline. Okay. Well, the thing is that that operation can be done as a what they call a filter mask, so it can be applied to multiple animated frames all at once. Okay. So obviously, one thing we have missing here is this. Okay. So now the question becomes this, and it's an important question. Okay. Important question. Is this better than this? Now, if you're going to argue that this is better, maybe because the characterization of the guy is a little better the first time I drew it, okay, fine. But as far as overall image quality, I would say it's not better. I don't think it's better or worse. And by going straight from a sketch to color, by drawing shapes of color and then letting the computer do the work on the outlines, and then I just fill in the interior lines, I don't think it's harmed the quality at all. And the time it takes is enormously less. Like enormously. I'm not... Did I say enormously? Because it's a lot. The time savings is substantial. I'm eating my olives now. So, for me, it started out as pragmatism because I'm like, I just don't want to be fighting with ink and paint all day. But what it turned out was that I actually thought that on balance, most of the time, it wound up actually looking better. So I'm like, oh my goodness. We've got a major time reduction in the overall aesthetic quality of it. You know, once it's edited together and you see it flow, I'm going, oh my goodness. It looks better. These guys, I'm pretty sure, had their outlines generated automatically. I know this one did. You know, it's a bit of a mix because my work procedures are evolving, and so there are shots that weren't done that way. This was all... The only thing that was inked here, you can see it actually if you look real... Let me put it on the big screen. I drew these little lines, and these little sketchy lines, boom, 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 you're done. all of the outlines were generated automatically. And I tried actually multiple different algorithms in Krita to sort of figure out a way to do that. And I just kind of arrived at a method that seems to be the fastest way of doing it that looks really good. And it looks good every time. It's very predictable, you know, it's consistent. So let me look at okay, so when you finish okay, so I noticed for the last I'm going up here on your comments here. Because I noticed that for the last series I thought it was your style or workflow. You know, if you go back to that anime though, a lot of it looked pretty rough. I mean, it wasn't like this shot here, what you're seeing on the screen right now, I would go, you know, it's fine. I would release a cartoon and distribute it, and I'd feel good about the product. Okay? For the most part, I would say 70% of the anime I was working on before I started on this show, I would not say that. I would say I would say 70-80% of it I'm not satisfied with. I would actually want to redo. When I got serious about this show, it was because advice from my film distributor led me to believe that a cartoon of this nature was a viable product. And so I stopped the press. I stopped everything. I said, I'm gonna write a script and treat this like one of my movies, where I'm gonna treat it very seriously and be extremely we're not just kind of learning as we go, even though I am learning as I go, but I want to really, it's time to figure it out, you know, and produce work that is going to be acceptable as an actual distributed product. You know, it's just my conceit, you know, to what I think my standards may suck, you know. Someone else might disagree completely and think, well, no, dude, actually what you're doing looks pretty crappy. And they're welcome to that opinion. You know, I'm not revolutionizing the world of animation here by any means. Okay, so he says, when you finish some animation, I was thinking it also helps motivate you to push forward faster. I will tell you that, dude. That is absolutely true. Actually, what happened was, as you may be aware, I started at the end of the show. Okay, I started and I worked backwards. And the reason I did that is because I said I want to figure out what my workflow is, and then once I really nail it down, I'll go back and start at the beginning. And the reason I thought I'd do that is that way my best work will be at the beginning. So when people first watch the show, they're going to see the fully evolved version of what I'm able to deliver. Okay, and I'm not saying it's great, okay, guys? I'm not. Like, and there's a lot of things to fix. Like here, the little sheep, there's a little anomaly right there that has to be erased. But that was my thinking. Go back to the beginning once I figured out what I'm doing, and then work forward, and that's what I did. And this was a key moment, and it was about 3 weeks ago, 2-3 weeks ago, maybe 3. I edited this much together. Maybe even only this much, actually. I edited about the first 15 to 30 seconds. And when I saw it, so this is what I saw. I saw the way it was, I put a little music behind it. I think you guys can hear it. And once I saw this, it was like game over. I'm like, again, there's, you know, I'm not saying it's great. It's just a cartoon, you know. But once I saw it edited together and felt the story, I was like, okay, this is, I get it now. This is, I'm going to do this. It's like, I'm not poking at it. I'm not thinking maybe I'm going to do this. I'm going to create this show. Because I knew it felt good. You know, when I saw it edited, I put the voices in, and I'm like, okay, this is going to work. So let's rock and roll. Go time. And once that button got pushed and that switch flipped, in my head. Then I got real aggressive about, okay, let's really figure out this workflow. And so everything from here on forward, this is all literally 30 seconds per day of finished animation. In 6 hours or less. Sometimes it's only 4 hours. It depends on the day, but basically 6 hours-ish is what I budget myself. I give myself 6 hours to work on it. So yeah, once I saw it edited, it was a motivation. I will absolutely give that to you. And so what I've been doing is interactively feeling how the edit informs the storyboard and actually the script. And then this document right here is the script. It's up on the other screen. But I'm literally changing the script as I go to sort of keep things matching up. The good news is this. Right now, 1 page of script is coming out to 1 minute of show. But the script is 53 pages. So that means I've got about 5 pages of latitude. I got about 5 pages that can get cut out of the show. And I'm still at my 48-minute, full-length pilot, full length. So good news is this. This stuff what was done today, I think started here. And what's going to be done tomorrow is literally all montage. So it's basically about a dozen finished drawings that are all going to... There's a little bit of animation, but mostly because the narrator's telling you what's happening as it recaps everything you need to know so that the real story can begin 15 years later, okay, when Mel is, 15 years old. So let me see here. Yeah, this is what I've been doing for my new comics, and I've been thinking of doing just that for my animation. Just straight paint everything. And I would say, I don't know if it's everybody's cup of tea. I would say try it. If the aesthetic, like through here, you can see some of these drawings. Like that's overproduced. I see it here. Like to me, this is a striking contrast. You guys can disagree if you want. I'm open to ideas, of course. But I look at how simple these characters are right here, but they look good. For a color actually looks better. The simple, faster solution is actually what looks the best. So that's great. That's wonderful. This guy, he's probably in the sweet spot. He's kind of in between. This is probably about where we want to be most of the time, and I think probably most people would agree. If you take a look, if you say, well, where are you borrowing your aesthetic from? I would say it's pretty much Avatar: The Last Airbender, and then a little bit of various other animes like that have a more simplified style like this. There's one on Tubi called Carried by the Wind that I like. I find it kind of funny. That seems to hit the sweet spot stylistically. The old Del Toro Quest cartoon or anime was pretty close as well. And if you watch that show, you'll find that other than the CGI stuff, it's pretty much 8 frames per second animation all the way through. It's pretty good. The story and the characterization is pretty awful, actually, in Del Toro Quest. They really, in my view, targeted too young of an audience. They made it too cheeseball, and it makes it hard to watch for me. But visually, I like the style. So you see what I mean. Stuff like this glow stuff, I mean, this is really cheap. This is like 2 minutes to go into Krita and just add a layer over top of it that creates a glow that fades over time or whatever. This shot was economical because this shot was incredibly economical. You know why? As he leaves, you know why? You saw it in the title. Because it's this shot. No, it's not. It's this shot in reverse. I just took this shot right here and ran it backwards, and it worked great. So, if you can get away with it, that's what you want to do. Okay, so still working my way through the comments. No underdrawings or sketches at most of storyboard. Practicing straight painting. I think it's cool. I mean, at the end of the day, you can get good at it. It's like playing your guitar. I've been actually playing a lot of guitar. After I'm done animating for the day, I walk around the neighborhood, and everybody in the neighborhood seems to be talking about the guy that walks around playing his guitar and style. Yeah, and I wouldn't personally call it painterly myself, only because I wouldn't call that a painterly style because to me it's very blocky and cartoony actually, but it works, you know. So you know this guy could have been just drawn directly. But you really have to be able to, I think the trick is you got to see it in your head. So let's just take this as an example. Here's a guy working in the field in the background, right? Okay, so I'm going to go to the color layer. How would I do this? Okay, this is actually kind of an interesting study. So if this guy was in the background, let's just say, what you find is that when you draw silhouettes, it kind of suggests stuff. Okay, at least for me. I would think for most people this would probably be true. So I can see in my head kind of this character here. So I'm thinking his one arm would be out like this, and he's got his hand kind of like that, you know, and he's holding some kind of tool. And I guess you'd see his other elbow maybe back here. And let's go to a brush instead of the freehand path tool. So now he's got a hoe. Okay. Okay, so that's cool. I'll just do a fill operation there. Oops, I didn't want that second one. Okay, so if you were doing this in Krita, which I am obviously, but what you might do just to make it faster is just add another layer above it that's alpha locked. And the reason you do that is so that now you can go in and go, well, okay, now I'm going to just put a different color here on his headdress, you know, or like this, or say, well, no, I mean, I got to give this guy some flesh tone. He's got to have a face, so right? And now if you zoom way out, you realize, okay, yeah, I guess I actually can kind of get away with murder here because he's so small in the frame that you're never going to see anything. So let's just go ahead and, oh, let's say we're going to give him a belt. Let's give him a belt that's kind of pinkish or something. So we just go, boom, right? And we say, well, we need some flesh tone here, so we just color over that. And then we say, well, we got to put a handle on this thing, you know, like that. And maybe we'll give it a little bit of outline action so that, oh wait, we need another hand here, so let's just put another hand here and like so. Boom. Whoops. Kind of weird. It's surprisingly come on, get the thing the right size there, dude. Surprisingly difficult to actually create good art on the fly here on YouTube. Okay, I just made a mistake. By the way, this is the quintessential mistake you will make. Okay, in Krita, at least for me, is you're just flying along and you create a bunch of lines and then realize you put them in the wrong layer, and it can really become a hassle to correct for that. But anyway, well, I guess that's kind of the opposite of what I wanted to do. So I'm just gonna give this guy some feet, like so, and maybe some lines. Pretty simple, like this. We'll go way in deep here and erase a bit. Boom, boom. Guess we want to be in the lines layer. You know, just a little bit of detail, yada yada yada. This is supposed to be ancient Middle East. You probably knew that. Okay, so, but at size, there it is. But, you know, I mean, okay, Blifton, I appreciate your comment. I thought your last project looked really good. I went back and looked at it actually, I think 2 days ago, and by the way, I'm seeing something very concerning here. But because this is on a bunch of different layers, it's going to be a hassle to fix, so I'm not going to deal with it right now. But I guess I could do it this way. Go into the group, hit the A key, go into liquefy mode. Alright. Oh, come on. Trying to make this bigger. Okay. But you knew that. Yeah, I mean, it's like obviously the guy, the balance and the weight is like completely all wrong. So anyway, okay. Is there anywhere you'd post the final animation? Okay, one thing at a time here. So anyway, what I was gonna say to Blifton is, I went back just, I think 2 days ago, and looked at the anime. There we go. Waiting for OBS to reconnect. Okay, more painterly, and I'm trying to lean more towards a Frazetta-like style. Dude, I challenge you to do just that. You do a Frazetta-like style. That's a challenge right there. I'm gonna try. I'm gonna try Frazetta-like style. Here we go. I'm gonna try a Frazetta-like style. Watch this. Watch this. I'm gonna try a Frazetta-like style. Oh yeah, that's what I'm gonna do. We'll see how this goes. Watch this. Oh my goodness. Well, wait. We have a problem. Yeah, we have a problem. We gotta shrink it, or it's not gonna fit. Boom. Okay, so now if you're gonna draw in a Frazetta-like style, you gotta draw a very buxom woman. Okay, so she's got to be very buxom. And she's got to be okay, hold on now. Let's flip it. And of course, if it's a Frazetta girl, she can't have any clothes. Right? So we got to give you like some jeweled loincloth kind of situation. Right? So there, boop 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 boop. So she's like a, you know, doing some crazy spell, right? Because it's a Frazetta girl. She's oh Oh man. Oh yeah. And of course, she has to have a companion who's like a lizard. Right? With a big sail thing going on and big tail back here in the back, and then, you know, big claws here, and the claws are actually sneaking right here between her legs. Frazetta chick kind of thing. But yeah, I mean, it's a lot of fun actually drawing this kind of stuff. You can learn a lot from Frazetta. But yeah, the guy was amazing. In fact, after he had his stroke, I don't know, you probably know this, but after he had his stroke, he taught himself to paint left-handed. You know, pretty cool. So anyway, I'm gonna actually wrap it up here. Oh man, it's after 9 o'clock. Yeah, I'm gonna wrap it up. So, is there anywhere you'd post the final animation? I will say, I assume you're talking about this, okay? And the answer would be probably not, only because I'm putting this together to deliver to a distributor who would presumably, he'll have it on Tubi and actually probably be available through their YouTube channel actually. Yeah, I believe it. I believe it. Frazetta was an amazingly talented guy. Neat guy. So you'll see bits and pieces here, and when I do these kinds of things, of course I recap, you know, what's been done the week or two before or whatever, you know, so you can just kind of see what's going on. But the final show will probably not be posted on YouTube directly, because I'd rather put that in the hands of the distributor and then forget about it, and I'm moving on to the next episode. To, you know, the focus is on creating a dozen shows. That's the goal. At the current pace, that's a realistic goal. So short answer is no, but if your point is that you would want to see it, you'll be able to see it. You know, it's just, it won't be me putting it out there in all likelihood. You know, that's the distributor's job. That's what I pay them the big bucks for. So anyway, I think that's it for me. I'm getting to be starting to get toasty. Tubi's cool. I've been looking at all these internet streaming markets. Well, yeah, I mean, you can Tubi will take just about anything. I mean, you build traction, then you can explore other markets. Okay, so let me address that, okay? The story on that is that it was actually the distributor that told me that what they were finding with the distribution of my films was that, and just to keep things fun and interesting, I'll just go ahead and let this play in the background in a loop. So what they found was that the markets like Amazon were starting to actually be displaced, or getting some real competition from markets, or from platforms like Tubi or Pluto TV. So more and more of the revenues were coming from those places. It's not really difficult to if you're going to produce this cartoon that you're working on up there in Chicago, if it's good, you're not going to have trouble finding distribution. I'm quite sure of that. Now, you could self-distribute, okay? So if you put something on Amazon Prime Video, or work directly with Tubi or some of these other platforms, you're going to make more money because you're not going to be splitting with a distributor. So that's the advantage. The downside is you have to do it all yourself, which means you need to be compliant with their you know, whatever their protocols are for the media that you provide. So I found that to be a bit of a hassle with Amazon Prime Video, because one of my films is on Amazon Prime Direct or Amazon. Well, you can watch it on Amazon Prime if you have that. It's called Clerical Errors, but they're getting it uploaded to them, and especially the closed captioning, getting that compliant so that it passed muster and then can all of a sudden be released everywhere and available to watch, took like a month and a half. I mean, it was a really time-consuming thing, and I wound up paying $100 to have somebody else, you know, do the closed captioning just so that it would definitely pass muster. And it's cheap to do. I mean, if you have a 24-minute show, it's going to cost you $24 to have it closed captioned. It's cheap. Okay, it's quite cheap. So it's worth paying someone else to do it and do it right. But you know, my sense would be that to take my cartoon and self-distribute it to all the possible platforms that are out there, assuming I even know what they are, right, is almost a full-time job all its own. Okay. And that's fine. You're going to make more money on a per-view basis doing it that way, because you're not splitting with a distributor. On the other hand, if you work through a distributor, they're doing all that for you. You're providing them. You're providing one entity with the master. Typically, it's a ProRes QuickTime video. Actually, it's normally in the industry, that's normally what people pass around is QuickTime ProRes is standard. And so you're going to give that to one person, and they're going to get it out to Tubi. They're going to get it to Pluto. They're going to get it to Amazon. They're going to get it to Netflix if that's possible. And as far as getting, I would just say this to kind of wrap up today. If what you're interested in doing is getting a movie or a cartoon or whatever in those, you know, a bigger distributor or a bigger platform like Amazon, working it directly with Amazon or creating something for Netflix, I think the bottom line is it needs to be really good. You know, it needs to be undeniably compelling in order to get their attention. And typically, I think for most producers, the way that happens is that you produce something that is pretty good or does pretty well, and then that gives you a foot in the door where the Netflixes or the Amazons are going to be willing to have a conversation with you. My sense is that, and I've had distributors tell me this, Netflix is a tough nut to crack because it's just hard to get a meeting with them. Because obviously everybody wants to pitch their idea to Netflix and get a direct-to-Netflix production, you know, for the big bucks. And that day, the season where that was really kind of like a hot opportunity is long since gone. It's been gone for at least 5 years, I would say. You know, it's a long gone situation. You need to now. I would say this. It would not shock me. Okay, if I produce my cartoon, okay, and I go ahead and distribute it with Bridgestone, which is the distributor that has handled my other films. You know what? If the thing's making money, then it's going to get a little bit of traction. You know, culturally, let's say it's not going to be big. My cartoon's not going to be the thing everybody's talking about. I guarantee you that. But it'll find an audience. And when that happens, the way the movie industry works is once you get a little bit of success with something, then the opportunity to do the next little bit bigger thing just happens because people are interested in what you're doing if you're doing something that's kind of cool, you know. And then those things just build on each other, and you know, presumably if you make a pretty good movie, then you'll the way it used to be put, I don't know if this holds true today, but the way it used to be, the idea was that if you want to make a $100,000 movie, then make a $10,000 movie, and you'll get your opportunity to make a $100,000 movie. And then if you make your $100,000 movie, you'll get your chance to make your $1 million movie. Now, keep in mind that just means, I would put it this way. You're talking about spending someone else's money. Okay? Are you going to put up your money for Joe Podunk on YouTube who has a cool idea and says he can deliver? Are you going to do that? Are you going to put up, $30,000 or whatever of your money so that so-and-so over there can create his great cartoon? Now, let's actually follow that through for a minute. Okay? Let's just follow that through. You take Howard Wimshurst, or you take Ed Tadeo, guys that are on YouTube that are doing pretty good animation stuff. And I say to myself, okay, so Howard says, well, I've got a concept and I want to create a cartoon and I need a budget. I need $30,000. Or I need $50,000 or $100,000 or whatever. If it was my money, the first question I would be asking is, well, okay, what's your concept? I would actually not even be thinking about Howard or whoever as an animator. Of course you can animate. That's a given. That's assumed. You can do decent animation, or you can, presumably you have the basic skill set. That's not even a question. That has to be assumed. So now what's the question then? The question is, well, what's your market? I mean, who are you targeting this to? What's going on in that market? What are people buying? What are people watching? What are people watching on PBS Kids? What are people watching on Nickelodeon? Does your concept fit nicely? It's not that there's not room for a revolutionary or cool concept that might just go viral, because it could. But if something's going to go viral, it usually happens kind of on its own, apart from the general money. You have to have proven that you can deliver a finished product. That's why I tend to let's get away from cartoons and talk about films. If someone wants to be a filmmaker, I definitely don't encourage creating short films. Why? Because there is nowhere in the marketplace that pays for short films. You can find a little niche here and there, maybe a little bit, but basically nobody pays for short films. Nobody sits and watches short films. What do people watch? They either watch movies or they binge watch TV shows. So your concept needs to be either a movie or a series TV show. My concept here is a series TV show. I have a concept for 12 episodes. One is written. The overall arc for all dozen episodes is in mind but not written yet, and but I have a finished script. I can demonstrate the ability to write a script that is a full 48-minute episode. When I made films, I can write an hour-and-a-half script that shows that I have the whole thing's written, So you've got something you can read and look at that tells you that this person actually can create what they say they want to create. So what's important about that is that this person's ability to animate doesn't matter that much. His ability to animate, if you're talking about making a cartoon, your ability to animate's assumed. Right? Okay? So in the picture of whether somebody's going to give you money, that's the least of their concerns. It's the least. It's the last thing they're concerned about. Yeah, of course you can animate. If you can't, you can just stop the conversation right now. Why are you wasting my time? Okay? So now that we know you can definitely animate, maybe you've shown and proven that, now 90% of the things we're going to talk about as to whether I'm going to give you any money have nothing to do with whether you can animate. It has to do with your script. It has to do with the story. It has to do with your work ethic, how much you can produce, whether you can meet a deadline. I mean, it's all those things, And then all the ancillary costs, like your voice talent, your music, all the stuff that somebody's going to have to pay for, right? Unless you can do it yourself. Can you do it all? I'm very, very, very fortunate. in that I actually can do it all. And I know that that's extremely unusual and kind of weird. So I tend to think, because I worked hard to develop those skills, that anyone could do it if they were really motivated to do it. So blah, blah, blah. That's just my opinion. But if you can't do it, then you got to get somebody else to do it, and that means somebody's got to pay somebody for it. Or you could form a little virtual corporation and get everybody to volunteer with the hope of making something on the back end. It's great if you can pull it off, and, you know. So the crowdfunding climate is very democratic. You know, the crowdfunding climate is completely democratic, because if you can put a package together and convince people that it's worth throwing some money at, then you may be able to do it. And it's great, and you should try. It doesn't hurt to try. Okay, so you got some more comments here. You build traction, then you can explore the market. Okay. Yeah, I work in accessibility, so I'm familiar with that feature. I work in accessibility. It's the same in comics. That's why indie producers use funding via crowdfunding. What do you mean by work in accessibility? I don't know what you mean by that. Makes it sound like your day job is got something to do with, you know, wheelchairs or something. I'm not sure. I don't know if I'm reading that sentence correctly. But the other advantage I have is that I don't need anybody else's money. It's not like I'm rich or anything. I don't claim to be. You know, I'm doing okay. I'm doing just fine. And but I don't need someone else to give me money in order to sit and animate all day. I understand that for a lot of people that's not true. If you were going to give now, actually, in the climate of COVID-19, this is an amazing time to be alive. Okay, hold on. Accessibility testing for app. Oh, okay, got it. Accessibility expert. Right on. Okay, that's cool. Yeah, I mean, for a lot of people, you would need some kind of wage, you know, to justify spending all day working on a cartoon. But what I was going to say about COVID-19 is that, you know what, everybody's home right now, you know, and a lot of people are out of work, so never been a better time to develop your skills, you know. So, you know, that's everybody's own individual call whether they're going to actually do it or not. And it's tough. It's a tough thing. I don't want to get all philosophical here too much, but yeah, see, that's cool, man. I do web development too. I've got a number of clients that I've done their websites, and my son's getting into that as well, even as we speak. That's what he's been doing during COVID-19, is I actually trained him for 2 months in web development. You know, basically HTML, then CSS, then JavaScript, and then the sales process, and that's what he's been doing, and he's doing fine. He's right on schedule, so it's all cool. It is a great skill because there is an unlimited number of niche directions you can go related to the web development space. So it's a great place to be. I've said to several friends or whatever that if this cartoon thing doesn't take off, I'll just go back to going and pitching clients on websites, you know, because it's fun. I like coding and all the rest, you know, that goes with it. So, what I was saying about getting philosophical is that it requires a real to really commit yourself to developing a new skill, or trying to do like what I'm doing here, where you're taking something that's going to take a long time to do, you know, let's face it, and commit to live parallel lives. We live parallel lives, man, because that's when I started doing the web thing was about 1998. So, and I had clients in other areas, and I just decided, you know what, I'm looking at this web thing, and I'm like, yeah, I could do that. I could do that. I send a fax back when faxes were a thing. I sent a fax to all my clients, say, yeah, we'll do a website, $2,500, you know. And a couple of them responded, and it started from there, you know. There's all there is to it. Crazy. So I would rather do art because coding requires another way of thinking that's way more draining than being creative. I would say, you know what? I would say yes and no. Yeah, I did quite a few Flash websites too. But let me put it this way, because it speaks back to animation as well. The problem is not, I think for me, is not that the coding process is any way draining. Here's the problem. It's a big problem, and most of my filmmaking career was marked by this, which is this. I'm always trying to deliver a product that I don't yet know how to do what I'm saying I'm going to be able to do. Okay? Now you can do that, and it can be a fun way to challenge yourself, and sometimes there's a decent reward as well, but it's really, really stressful. Okay? So in other words, in coding is only stressful to the degree that I'm trying to implement an idea where I don't know the APIs or I don't know the well, in some cases even the nuance of the language or whatever, but when you don't know how to do what you need to do or want to do, then that becomes a very draining process. I actually last summer spent several weeks completely re-grokking JavaScript, because you can get a lot done with JavaScript and especially with jQuery without really ever understanding what's really going on under the hood with the language. And that bothered me. I just wanted to understand it. So I kind of read a couple of Doug Crockford's books and actually wound up strongly disagreeing with Crockford about some things. But I finally, and I realized that for a C++ programmer, JavaScript is actually quite tricky. First class functions, and more importantly, what's really going on with classes and objects and functions and stuff in JavaScript, I would say most people using the language actually don't have any idea, don't understand at all what's going on. And once I understood it, I realized it was actually simple. But it took me a while to grok it because most of the information out there is either really wrong-headed in terms of how they explain things, like closures. Look up YouTube. Look up closures on YouTube. No one explains closures well. It's amazing to me. They're actually quite simple. I probably shouldn't explain it here since people here aren't particularly interested probably in JavaScript. But anyway, for art there's no debugging or problem solving that feels that way for me. Well, that's good, you know, so you should do it. You should do the art thing. Doodling since I was 4. Yeah, that's cool. So, well, anyway, that's it for me. I see Valerie passing through. I want to go hang out with Valerie. So, the love of my life just walked through the room and sent me a vibe that says, "Come and see me." So, I'm gonna go do that. And yeah, later, man. It's been kind of fun. I've enjoyed the chit chat in the live stream, and I'm sure I'll do it again. But for now, as you guys know, there will be more later. Boom.